Hey everybody, welcome back to Garage Band Guitarist. And in these next two lessons, we're going to take a break from the guitar playing material because you need some time to practice up the G, C, D, E minor, and A minor chords and songs. And so while you're doing that, I'm going to give you a couple other different kinds of things that'll help you with your guitar and your guitar playing as we go forward. So this first lesson, I'm also calling it aside number one because it's not something you necessarily need to be doing right now when we hit this part of the course. And you may want to come back to this later to actually deal with this, and that's changing the strings on your guitar. I'm going to show you how to do that now. So if you already know how to do that, you don't have to worry about this lesson. You can just skip it and move right on. So it's kind of optional in that sense. But I wanted it in here because at some point you're going to want to change your strings on your guitar. If your guitar is brand new, you may not need to do that. Sometimes they put decent strings on a guitar when you buy it, but other times they put kind of crappy ones. And so if you get a new guitar, it might not be a bad idea to go ahead and replace them. They'll maybe work for you a little bit better. And stay in tune better and things like that. You don't know how long that guitar has been sitting around a warehouse or a music store or something either, and so those strings could actually be pretty old. As they age, they stretch and they get to the point where they don't sound very good. They corrode a little bit, and they can be hard to keep in tune and so on. And so you don't want to leave them on the guitar too long, but they'll last quite a while. It depends how much you use the guitar and so forth. I would say, for most normal people, you probably want to change them every couple of months. I do it probably I use a lot of guitars, and so I don't need to do it quite as often, but I probably do it every 3 or 4 months. I'll change my strings. People who play out a lot and pros, they'll change them every time they play out, I don't usually do that. I don't think you need to do it that often, but if they're starting to sound a little weird, a little tinny, if there's any kind of buildup of gunk on them, or you see any discoloration on the strings, it's time. Go ahead and get a new set and change them. You can get guitar strings just about any music store. You can find guitar strings. And I talk in a prior video about string gauges, thicknesses of strings. So I'm not going to go over that again here, but you can go back to one of the preliminary videos where I talk about guitars and equipment, and I talk about strings in that video and give you a little bit of guidance on what kind of strings you might want to get for your guitar. Okay? All right. Let's see. Now, the other thing that I want to say before, I'm going to shift the camera so you can see my hands and what I'm doing while I'm changing the strings on the guitar. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention that changing the strings on an acoustic guitar and an electric guitar can be a little bit different, okay? And I'm going to change them on an acoustic guitar because I've been trying to guide you to using an acoustic guitar in this early part of your guitar playing. But I also want to talk a little bit about the differences when you do it with an electric guitar. And so if you are using an electric guitar as you're taking this course, you might want to skip ahead to that part. Well, you probably want to go through this acoustic one, watch it first, and then, there's a chunk on the end that talks a little bit more about the specifics with an electric guitar. If you're using an acoustic guitar, you don't need to bother with that part of the video, but it's there for those of you who are using an electric guitar, okay? And I think that's about it before I shift the camera, so let me do that, and then we'll get into how to actually change the strings on your guitar. Okay, we're back, and I've set up a little guitar fix-it station here. You don't necessarily need this kind of stuff in order to change the strings on your guitar, but it helps shoot the video as well. But it's handy to have this kind of stuff too when you're doing work on your guitar. So this is totally optional, but I have this pad, this black pad down here, which stretches down the whole length of the guitar and supports the body of the guitar down on that end down there. And then I've got this little neck support here. You can buy these for, I don't know, $10 or something on Amazon, and you just set it under here and you put the neck in it, and it gives you a little bit more support and stability when you're working on your guitar. You don't need that at all. You don't even need to, lay it down or anything to actually change the strings on the guitar. But it'll help us with the video, and it's a nice thing to have when you're doing certain kinds of things on your guitar. This is another example of a support. This is just a different one. It's made out of cork, you can get them different heights, and they usually have at least 2 different kind of heights on them that support the guitar neck in different ways, depending on what your guitar is kind of like. And so you don't need that, but it's a handy thing to have. I just toss it in my bag in case I ever need to do something with my guitar when I'm out and about. Okay. All right. So that's just so you know what you're looking at there. All right. Now let's go to the actual changing of the guitar. And the first thing is, what kind of tools do you need in order to change the guitar? You don't really need much of anything, honestly. You can change them with virtually nothing except new strings, okay? And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But you also could benefit from having a guitar tool of some kind that's a string winder. And I talked about these in the equipment video too. This is the cheapest, most typical kind of string winder, and it just allows you to slip this thing on the end of your tuning, your tuner there, and you can use it to turn the strings quicker. And this is when you want to have that, when you're actually changing the strings. You don't use this on a normal day-to-day basis when you're tuning your guitar. There's another one, the very typical kind. And this was the one I recommended, though, on the video, because it has the winder part on it right here that you use to turn the tuner. But it also has a thing in the middle. It's a little thing to clip the string. After you get it on there, you're going to have extra, and you want to clip it off. So it's got that in the middle. And then it's got this little tool on the end here that we'll use to pull the peg out of the other end of the guitar, okay? So, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. But having all those together in one piece is a nice little feature, okay? You don't need to have that, though. You can, pull them out with, pull the pegs out with pliers, and you can clip the strings up with a typical just pliers or a wire cutter type thing, So you don't need these specialized tools, but they're just handy, and they're relatively cheap. So if you want to get one, it's probably worth having. Okay. All right. So I'm going to use this one when I do this string change. Okay. Okay. So the other thing is strings, right? And so this is a packet of new strings, and I don't know, you can get strings, you can get really cheap strings all the way up to ones that cost $20-25 and more for a set of strings, probably down to like $10 or something, or maybe a little less if you shop around and buy them in bulk or something. I happen to like this particular brand of strings. It's a company called Just Strings, and they sell all kinds of strings, but they have their own brand too. It's quite cheap, and and I like them. I think they work pretty good. Since I changed my strings and use a lot of guitars, I want to keep it relatively economical. So these are the ones that I often use, but I have other ones I use as well for different purposes and things. Okay, when you open up a pack of strings, there's usually the strings are usually in there in some kind of little packets, and sometimes there's one for each string, so there'll be 6 little packets in there. Sometimes they have them bundled in various ways. This particular brand, they put them in 3 envelopes, so there's 2 strings in each one of these. So the first and the 4th string are in the first envelope, the second and the 5th, and this one in the 3rd and the 6th. And the reason they don't have 1 and 2 together is because it's harder to tell 1 and 2 apart from each other because they're both so skinny, and so they make it easy because it's easy to tell the first from the 4th and the second from the 5th and so on. So there's different ways they have of identifying which one is the first string and the second and so on. Sometimes they have little color coding on the strings themselves, on the little ball that's on the end of the string that I'm going to show you in just a second, but this is typically how they come in these little packets. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start on changing the strings on this guitar. I'm going to start with the 6th string, and the way they number strings, and I mentioned this previously, is the skinniest one. The highest one is called string number 1. So they number them 1 from the highest, skinniest down to 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and I'm going to do the 6th one first because it's just the easiest one to see on the camera since it's thickest. Okay, so that's what we're going to do first. Okay, all right. Now, when you take the string out of the package, what you want to do is take the string, and they'll be wrapped together like this somehow. And you just want to take the string that you're going to work with. In this case, it's the thick one, the 6th one. You just want to unwind it all the way. Okay, so let me get this one out of the way. We don't need that one right now. We'll get to that one in a second. Okay, and here's the unwound 6th string. And it's got 2 ends to it. And on one end, you'll have usually a little ring like this. I don't know if you could see that, but let me try. There you go. You can see that little ring, and the string is wrapped around that ring. Sometimes it's like a little ball instead, but that's the end of the string, and that's the part that's going to go on the other end down on the bridge when we get to putting that part in. The other end just is, it's just a chopped off string right there. Okay. And so that one doesn't have a ball, and that's going to be the part that's going to be up here on the actual tuning peg. Okay, so that's our string. So you just want to kind of lay that out here. Okay, so to actually change the string now, the first thing we have to do, obviously, is take the old one off so we can put the new one on. Okay, when you change the strings on a guitar, you can take them off one at a time or whatever, or you can take them all off at the same time if you want to. Now, some people will tell you not to do that, and blah, blah, blah. These are the things that people like to argue about in the comments on guitar videos. But don't worry about it. You can take them all off at the same time when you change them. When I change strings on a guitar, I usually like to just take them all off all at the same time. And the reason I like to do that is because it gives me a chance to just clean the fretboard up too. And when you play over time, it's sweat and oil on your fingers, and it eventually it starts to build up on the frets and things, and it gunks up the neck and everything. And so if you take them all off, you can get just take a little moment to clean the whole fretboard and make it nice and new feeling again. Okay. But I'm going to advise you in this first time changing your strings to just do one at a time. And the reason that I'm going to advise you to do that is because if you kind of forget how to do it after you got them all off and you're getting ready to put it on and like, oh gosh, what am I supposed to do now? How does this work? If you've just taken one off, you can still look at the other ones to see how they're on there and make sure you're doing it right. This isn't that critical when you're doing this kind of guitar because it's pretty straightforward. But when we get to some electric guitars, they can be a little trickier. And so sometimes it's better to just do one at a time as you're getting used to doing it. Okay, so I'm just going to do one here to show you how this works, even though I would ordinarily take them all off at once. Okay, all right, so what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to take off this string and we're just going to loosen it up. And you can do it with your hand by turning this thing repeatedly, okay? Or you can put your string winder on there and just do it really quick. Just spin it around a couple times and you're loose. And you want to get to the string to the part where it's just completely floppy, right? Like that, just completely loose. And then you're going to chop it in half to get it off the rest of the way. And you can keep making it loose and then pull it off other ways, but it's just easier to just chop it in the middle. Now it's in 2 pieces, and it's really easy to just wind it around and take it off the rest of the tuning peg. And you're done with that. That's garbage. You're going to throw it away anyway, so it doesn't really matter that you chopped it. Okay, so that's how you take it off of the top of the guitar. Now I'm going to flip the guitar around and we're going to take it off the bottom, and so you can see how that goes. Okay, so now here we are down on the bridge end of the guitar, and almost all acoustic guitars are set up like this one. Okay, they have these little pegs that hold the strings in to the bridge. Okay, and so you got to pull those out. All right, and the easiest way to do that, if you have one of these things, is you just take this little U-shaped tool and you stick it underneath the edge of the peg, and you just pry it out like that. Pry it up a little bit, and then it's up far enough you can pull it out with your fingers. Okay. Yep. And it just comes out and it looks like that. Okay. That's the peg. I forgot to say that when you're pulling these little pegs out, you don't have to have the little tool to do it. It's handy if you do have the little tool to pull them out, but you can pull them out with pliers or something like that too. Just try to be careful not to scratch your guitar or damage the peg itself when you're doing that. That's why these are so handy, because they really prevent that from happening. They allow you to do it without causing any problems. If you have this kind of string winder, if you look in the end there, you can see there's a little, let's see if I can, there it is. You see that in the end, there's a little groove there, and you can use that. That's there to help you pull the peg out. So you just slide that over the peg and pull it out. That's what that's there. So you'll see those on different kinds of string winders. They'll have that little helper there as well. But you can pull them out with pliers or something too. When you have that out, you can just pull the string the rest of the way out. Okay, sometimes you jiggle it around a little bit, but there it is. And that's also garbage. That's the other half of the string, to throw that away. Okay. All right. And now we take our new string and we just replace what we just did. So here's my string. Here's the little ring ball on the end. And I'm just going to put that right back in that hole, right where the other one was, like that. And then I'm going to take my peg and I'm going to slip it back in right where it was, like that. Now, before I do that, I want to point out to you that on the peg, there's a little groove on one side, okay? And you can't see it that well on this black peg. So I just brought down a white one from another guitar so you could see maybe a little bit better there, that there's a groove. You see that groove in there? And you want to line up that groove with the string. So the groove will be pointing up that way toward the top of the guitar, right? And so when we put it in, it slides kind of right over the string. The string fits in the groove of the peg, all right? That's what we want to do, all right? So that groove is important. You want to line that up. I'm going to do it with the black one, even though you can't see it. I can, and I'm going to just line it up so it's right on the string, and then you just push it down, right down into the bridge, push it down hard, and then just tug your string up a little bit, make sure it's in there good and snug and it's up as far as it can go. Just, kind of hand tight. Just push it down with your finger and pull the string up, and you're ready to go, okay? And then you're going to run it back up to the top, right over the saddle here, right over this white part is called the saddle, and right back up to the top. Okay, and now I'm going to flip the guitar back around so you can see what we do on that end. All right, so here we are back on this end, and now we're going to put the string back on this tuning peg. Okay, and so the first thing that you want to do, there's a hole in the tuning peg that the string runs through, and it'll make it easier for you if you turn this so the hole is vertical, so it's going up and down. The hole is like this, and you can slide the string right through it in the easiest possible way. So just manipulate this thing until the hole is going vertically up and down the guitar, just like the string would, okay? And then you take the string and you just run it in through the hole, okay? There it is, okay? So now we've got our loose string in the tuning peg. You can see it's caught in that hole now. Now here comes the most important thing that you're likely to mess up when you put the string on the guitar, and that's which way do you turn the peg. You want the string to go around the inside of the post, okay? In here. You want the string in there. And if you look at the old strings that I have on there, you can see that they're going around the inside. You see how they could be on the outside out here, but they're not. They're on the inside in here, right? Same thing with this one, right? It could be out here. If you turned it that way, it would go around that way, but you don't want that. You want it to be on the inside like it is here. You see how that's on the inside. Same thing on the other side. They're on the inside, not on the outside of the tuning peg. okay? Now, there's a bunch of reasons why that is, and I'm not going to spend time going over the technicalities of that right now, but your guitar will stay in tune better, and it'll operate better in a couple different ways if you put it so it's going around the inside. And the way you make sure it goes around the inside, it just depends which way you're turning the tuning peg. If I was turning it this way and the peg itself was turning clockwise, it would be doing the wrong thing. You see how that's setting itself up to go around the outside? I don't want that. I don't want that to happen. I want it to go around the inside. So I'm going to turn it so that the tuning peg goes in a counterclockwise direction as I'm looking down at it, and that way the string will go around the inside of the peg instead of the outside. Now that was a demonstration. Don't do that yet, okay? We got to do one more thing before we actually start turning that string, okay? And what we need to do, so we have our string in, and we're going to pull it so it's approximately taut here, but then we got to back it up some because we need some string to go around the post a couple of times, okay? So what I'm going to do, I got the string all the way in, I'm just pulling it hand tight, not putting a lot of pressure on it, but there it is. And I'm going to back it out about 1.5 inches or so, so maybe that much, okay? Up to the next post, maybe a little bit more. I'm going to back it up about that much, and that's going to give me some extra that I can wind around that post. And I'm going to need that to happen to hold the string tight so that it doesn't slip, okay? So now I've got it set, and I'm ready to actually turn the tuning peg. And so I can do it with my hand, and I can keep turning it and turning it and turning it like this, or I can do it with my handy dandy little string winder like this, and it'll go a lot faster. When you're winding it on the string, you want each wind to go underneath the one that preceded it, okay? So as it's going around, you want it to go lower and lower, and that'll hold the string in more tightly. So when you're doing this, if you just use your hand to hold the string down on the face of the headstock, then it'll go underneath as it's going around. So I'm just going to do that right now so you can kind of see what's going on here, okay? So I just start turning that around, and I'm holding it down so that the prior one goes over, and then you'll see that the one that's going in is following underneath the previous one, okay? And you just do that till it goes around 2-3 times, and you'll feel it's starting to get tighter up here, okay? So this is starting to get tight, and before I really tighten it up, I just want to make sure it's in my little groove there. And sometimes there's a little one on the other end too. Just make sure it's in the right spot on both ends before you really start tightening it down, okay? And so just do a couple more here. Sometimes you get a couple little jumps in there when it's doing, because the string is settling on to the peg, and you want to just get it in the ballpark of where it needs to be, okay? You're not going to tune it yet. Okay, that's pretty close to where it needs to be. So I've got my string on here, it's in the right position, and I'm done. That's it. I have put on my first string, okay? Or the 6th string. First one I'm showing you, and then you just take your little clipper and just clip off the end of the string. You're done. Boom, that's it, okay? And so now you have installed your first string. Simple enough. And you can see right there that I've got the string coming on the inside of the tuning peg, and it's gone underneath the turns that came before it, okay? And so that is ready to go, all right? That's it. So now I'm just going to bust through in high speed. Okay, I'm going to stop when I get to one string and just say something else about that string when I get to it. So hang on. Okay, now I've got the first 4 strings on, and now I'm going to stop here, like I said, for just a second, because I'm moving on to the ones that don't have that rough exterior on the string, that are just a plain string. And the reason I'm mentioning this moment is just because you have to have a little bit more of the string to go around the post with these. These ones that have the round wound kind of exterior, they grab onto the post better, and so you don't need to go around the tuning peg as many times. But with these, you need a little bit more, and it's not a big deal. You can really use the amount that I told you, but just make sure you don't shortchange yourself. If you don't give yourself enough there so it can go around a couple of times and grab onto itself, it won't hold, and it'll keep slipping, and it'll keep going out of tune. So make sure you give yourself enough to get around that peg a couple of times when you do these plain strings. All right, so that's it. The guitar is restrung, and now all you have to do is tune it up with your tuner, and you'll be ready to go. When you put new strings on, they do need to stretch a little bit before they kind of settle into their usual state. And so, when you tune up, you'll have to do it a couple of times, because you'll get it in tune, the string in tune, and then it'll stretch. It'll keep stretching, and so it'll slip down out of tune, and you'll have to do it a few times. And probably the first day or so, when you're playing the guitar after you put new strings on, you'll have to tune it a little bit more often, because the strings will keep stretching as they're kind of settling into the guitar, okay? So sometimes people will pull on them when they put them in to kind of stretch them. They'll do this, you just grab underneath it and pull up like that a little bit, just to get them to stretch a little bit, so you don't have to go through as much of that tuning stretching. Okay, so you can do that if you want to do that. That'll help it along, get it more stabilized in terms of tuning. Okay. All right, so that's it for replacing the strings on an acoustic guitar. Almost all acoustic guitars are set up the way that we did with this kind of string pegs on the top, tuning pegs on the top, and that kind of bridge that we had on the bottom with the little pegs that went into the guitar body. So chances are, if you have an acoustic guitar, it's like that. Probably 90% of them are like that. There are some little differences, though, in acoustic guitars, and I'm going to show you some things with electric guitars, and some of them apply to acoustic guitars too. They don't all have headstocks like this where there's 3 on each side. Some of them will be inline like this. Now this isn't an acoustic guitar, but just so you can see what it's like. And on these, you're winding the strings all the same way. So the first one is on the inside, and the rest of them follow that, even though the last 3 aren't really on the inside, but they're set up so that you have as straight of a line as you can down the guitar. That's why they're set up like that, to try to have a straight line. So they're all on the sort of lower side of the guitar. As you're holding the guitar, they wind around that way. Okay, so that's the difference between the headstocks that have 3 on each side versus the ones that have them all in a line like this. Okay, that's one difference you might find on an acoustic guitar. The other is the bottom. Most of them, like I said, have this set up with these little pegs, but there's some, particularly some older guitars that you might run into that have a different kind of thing on the bottom like this. It's kind of a little mechanism where the strings are held with this thing. It's like a little, they call it a trapeze, but you'll see that sometimes. And so the strings, feed through there and hook in a little bit differently. You don't have the pegs to deal with on this kind. You don't see that too often on acoustic guitars these days, though. I've got a ton of acoustic guitars, and every single one of them has the peg set up that I was just showing you. Okay. Now let me say a couple of things about differences when you're doing this with an electric guitar. If you're playing with an electric guitar, you will not have that set up with the little pegs at the bottom in the bridge. The bridges are very, very different, and there's a lot of different ones. Okay, so I'm going to show you a few, but this isn't exhaustive, and so it can get a little bit trickier replacing the strings on an electric guitar because of those bridges. There's one other thing on the top too that you will see on some acoustic guitars, but rarely. Okay, and that's on the headstock. But you typically see these on acoustic guitars. So up on the top here we have our tuning pegs, but some of them have what's called locking tuners. Okay, so on the back here you can see there's a little bit more to these tuners than if you looked on the back of your acoustic guitar. And what you have here is a little thumb screw like this. Okay, this thing spins. And what it does is it sort of clamps down on the string. Okay, so on the front, you have the string goes through the little hole, but instead of having to wind it around a bunch of times in order for it to lock in, what you have instead is there's a little post inside there that clamps down on the string. So you just run the string through there, and then you tighten up that thumb screw on the back, and it clamps down on the string, and you're ready to go. So you don't have to wind it around a bunch of times. You just shove it through, hold it finger tight, and then clamp that little thumb screw down on top of it, and you're just have to do a little bit to tune it up at that point, and you can clip it right off. Okay, so that locking tuner is common on a lot of electric guitars. I love having those locking tuners. It makes changing the strings a lot quicker, and there's some stability with tuning that comes along with having those locking tuners. And in fact, if I have a guitar I like and it doesn't have locking tuners on it, I will actually swap them out. I'll buy locking tuners and put them in the guitar. It's a pretty easy thing to do. So so that's the other difference with the headstocks. There's some acoustic guitars that have locking tuners, but not a lot. You don't see that too commonly. Okay. All right, so on to electric guitars, and the big difference, besides the potential for those locking tuners, is in the bridges, and that's really the difference. And so you're going to have a lot more to kind of manipulate sometimes when you're doing a string change on an electric guitar. And I'm starting with what is the most typical kind of bridge. Okay, so this is a two-piece bridge. What's going on here? So we have this one piece which anchors the strings in. The strings are actually running through that, and then they come up over this thing, which is where the saddles are. Okay, and so that's your bridge on this kind of guitar. Les Paul style guitars like this one very often have this kind of setup. And so when you take the strings off, you loosen them up on the top, you clip them, and they just slide out here, and you can see there's a little hole in the end there, and the string is just running right through there and goes back up to the top to the tuning peg. And you can actually see those little rings that are in there, and it's very obvious when you take one apart when you take a string and clip it off and you pull it out, you'll see you just slide the whole string right back in there and run it right up to the top to tune it up, okay? So those ones are pretty straightforward, but that's the most common one on these kind of Les Paul style guitars and a lot of other guitars. You'll see that two-piece bridge a lot. There's another one that's fairly common, I would say, which actually runs the strings through the guitar body, okay? So you can see the strings coming out down here on the bridge. Well, where are they hooked in? Well, they're hooked in to these holes in the back of the guitar, okay? And so when you change the string, you actually run the whole string. You start with the, you know, the end that doesn't have the ball on it, and you run it through that hole, and it comes up through here, and then you just pull it all the way through, and it goes up to the top of the guitar, and you hook it on to the tuner, okay? And so you can see it's coming out, if you can see, it's coming out of that little hole in there, but it started with you feeding it through these holes in the back, and you can see those little ball ends in there again, and so they get caught and held by these little holes in the back of the guitar, so it goes right through the body. These Telecaster style guitars and a lot of Strat style guitars have that kind of setup where it goes through the body. A lot of people like that because they feel like the string makes a great contact with the body, and you get more kind of sustain and more interaction between the string and the body of the guitar, okay? And so you'll see that that a lot in these Fender style particular guitars, okay? And ones that imitate those guitars. Sometimes you'll have kind of like a cheaper version of this. This is another Telecaster style guitar. It's a cheaper one though. It's the Squier Squier brand of Fender, so it's their lower end guitar. It's a nice little guitar though. I love this guitar actually. It plays great actually. It plays better than the more expensive one. But the bridge setup is different, okay? And there's no holes through the back of the guitar. There's no way to run them through. And so what's happening here, it's all part of this metal bridge that's on here, and there's a little hole at the bottom of the bridge. You see underneath that screw there, you can see the little end of the string again, that little ring thing. And so there's a hole there, and so when you take the string off, it comes out of that hole. Just pull it all the way out, and then you string the new string through there all the way up to the top, and the ball catches right there. And so you just run it through that hole and up through this little thing. So this is the saddle in this case, and so in there and up through there, and then all the way back up to the top of the guitar. Okay, so that's the way those ones work. This is another, I showed this briefly already because I wanted to show this trapeze kind of catch for the strings. But I wanted to make one comment about these kind of bridges. This is another two-piece bridge. So you've got the anchor for the strings down here, and you just run them through. There's little holes in there. There's a little spot to sort of clip that ball in to the trapeze here. Okay, and then it comes up over this, which is the saddles. Okay, like we had on that other two-piece bridge. But in this case, the saddle is not hooked into this bridge piece is not hooked into the guitar at all. It's just sitting there on top of the guitar. If I took these strings off, I could slide this thing around. Okay, and I could pick it up and take it right off the guitar. It's just sitting there. The only thing that's holding it in place is the pressure of the strings pushing down on it. Okay, so this right now it's in the right spot, and I don't want it to move when I change the strings, but it's easy when the string, especially if you take all the strings off at once, you can easily move it around, okay? And you don't want that to happen. So sometimes people will put a little piece of tape over it, or at least a piece of tape next to it so they know exactly where it goes. They'll put a piece of tape right here or something and right here so they know exactly where it goes, and they'll hold it into place while they're clamping the strings on. If you change the string one at a time, that won't happen because the other strings will hold it in place while you're changing one string. So that's another reason, if you have this kind of bridge, if you see that little wooden bottom on there, it's probably loose and not attached to the guitar. And so you just want to attend to that, because then your guitar won't tune properly. The notes won't be won't play properly when you fret them. They'll sound off if this thing gets moved too much. Okay, so I just wanted to hip you to that in case you have that kind of guitar. All right, and then the last thing to worry about with these bridges is if you have a tremolo on your guitar. Okay, tremolo is this whammy bar system, you know, where you can change the pitch of the strings. We're not going to talk much about how to use the whammy bar in this course, but you may have this on your guitar. And so if you do, you have a little bit more of a complicated situation in terms of changing the strings, okay? And there's a lot of bridges and things that are connected with different kinds of whammy bars, and they can get kind of tough to change the strings. But I'm going to show you this most typical one, which is, this is a Fender Strat. And this is the way the Fender Strats are set up. And so you flip the guitar over. There's this panel on the back because there's springs and things under there that help control the tremolo system. Okay, but if you look there, I'm just going to push the tremolo bar so you can see a little bit better. You see those holes right there? That's the part that's moving. That's attached to the strings. But you see those holes? The strings got to go through those holes. They got to go through those holes, and they'll come out the front and then up to the top to hook on to the tuning pegs. Okay, so when you string them through, they'll come out here, and then you run them up to the top. All right, so it's kind of like the ones where the holes go through the guitar, but you may have a little more of a challenge here because you're dealing with this moving part. Okay, when you're changing the strings on a guitar with a tremolo system, it's probably best to do it one at a time because the other ones will kind of hold the thing roughly in place. These take a lot of time to tune back up after you get the strings changed, because when you have this kind of a system, when you tighten up one string, it affects all the other strings, and so it's a little bit more of a challenge to tune this kind of guitar up. Okay, so that's that's a fairly typical kind of setup with a tremolo system. There's all kinds of them, like I said, and they can get really complicated. And I just wanted to mention two things about this other one. This is a Jackson guitar that's got a Floyd Rose tremolo system. And these tremolo systems are great because they clamp the string on both ends so it stays in tune better, right? It's not slipping around the tuning pegs and getting too loose. And people who do playing where they're doing a lot of, really radical, they're not just making a little bit of a wobble with the sound. They're dive bombing and the strings are getting totally loose when they're pressing the whammy bar down, right? And so those people really need a lot of control on the strings to hold them tight so they don't get out of tune. And so if you're going to play that kind of guitar, you need a tremolo system that really holds on tight on both ends. Okay, and this one is really a challenge to change. Okay, this one you actually have to clip the balls off of the end of the string, and you got to put it in here and tighten up these little clamps to grab onto the string. Okay, so that's a really tough one to change. This is not the kind of guitar I would recommend for somebody who's just starting off, because it's a real challenge to change these strings. Okay, the other thing that some guitars that are like this have, if they don't have locking tuners, they'll have something like this, which is a little clamp that clamps down on the strings on this end by the nut. All right, so there's a little Allen wrench thing that you loosen, but the strings run underneath it, and once you get the guitar in tune, you actually clamp those down so they hold the string perfectly tight, and that way it's clamped on both ends, and when I hit the whammy bar and loosen it back up, and I let go, it goes right back into tune because it's being held perfectly in position by those two clamps. Okay, that produces another challenge with tuning, because things can still get out of tune. It's not going to be perfect every time, and so there's little knobs down here for fine tuning. Once you get the strings basically in the right position, you can fine tune them with these down here. So again, I am not recommending this kind of guitar for a beginner at all. it's a real challenge to deal with all of these different complicated things that are happening on this guitar. But if you have one, I just wanted to signal that there's this kind of challenge with it. If you have this kind of guitar, definitely change one string at a time, so you can look at the next one if you mess it up and you're like, what did I do there? Make sure, just do one at a time. There's videos online and so forth you can find on how to change strings on a Floyd Rose. This isn't the only one. There's other kind of complications with these bridges and things, but I just wanted to signal that to you if you have that particular kind of guitar. Okay? All right, I think that's basically it for tuning or for changing your strings. So now you're ready to do that, and we'll move on to the next lesson. In that lesson, we're also not going to be doing a lot of playing, but we're going to talk some more about music theory, some of the structure of music. It's a pretty simple lesson, but it'll help you understand what we're doing with our chords that we already know, and then with the next set of chords that we're going to learn right after that lesson. See you next time.